3, 2, 1. And we are live. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People live stream, where I talk to senior designers from all over the world and where you get to literally ask them anything. So fire away with questions whenever something pops up in your head so you don't forget it. Drop them in the comments, whether you're listening to on YouTube or on LinkedIn. So let's start making this session as interactive as possible and drop an emoji or the city or country that you are tuning in from, right? Drop that in and we will start the show. This is the Design of Everyday People.
It sound right, boy.
And before we kick things off into today's stream, for this event, I partnered with Usercentrics to tell you about CookieBot. It's not cookie plus a robot, although that would be cool. It's actually a consent management platform to help your website and your app with compliant and legal risk. Have you ever heard of GDPR, TCF 2.2, FADP, CCPA, Google Consent Management? If the answer is, well, kinda, this might be the time to check CookieBot. It's the most trusted cookie consent solution, already helping 600,000 customers achieve compliance with privacy laws. Super easy to get started. So you can sign up with this QR code here, choose your banner from a template or design your own, and copy, paste your code into your website header. So go ahead and scan this if you want to check out that cookie banner or implement a cookie banner within your website just by scanning this QR code, or you can go to cookiebot.com. Let CookieBot deal with all your sensitive consent and legal stuff in a world of privacy-led marketing so you can focus on actually building products and less about the legal, boring stuff. Okay, so let's get back to the show. So welcome to How to Tell Your Story as a Designer. That's what you guys are here today for. And we have some people coming in. Mia from Vietnam. We have someone from Dubai. We have someone from Amsterdam. Great. Please share the YouTube link. Yes, I'll drop that YouTube link below. Someone from the States as well. Hi, Daniel. How you doing? Sorry, it's a little bit small on my screen. But yeah, welcome to this event. Let's start with quick introductions. I'll go first. I'm Chris, founder of UX Playbook, but before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. And now I spend most of my days helping designers navigate a fuzzy career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's enough about me and this cave I'm in Turkey. If you didn't notice, this is the different from usual. Today, I'm joined by Steven Steiner, designer, educator, and career coach. So let's get him out here and find out more about Steven. Steven, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. For the people that don't know you, would you like to tell them more about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So your intro was a solid start. So I've been a designer my entire career, worked my way up the corporate ladder to being a director, and then realized after doing what society told me to do, it didn't fill me up. So I jumped off the corporate ladder, and now I'm a career coach for designers with the hope of helping other designers get what they want next.
Okay, so mine and your goal is pretty aligned. We're both helping designers here, so that's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, so I guess before starting on our topic of how to tell your story as a designer, how did you decide to become a career coach? Like, give us a bit of the background of that story.
Totally. So even when I was 15 and a half, my first job was teaching swim lessons. And I've realized that I'm good at being able to take a complex topic and simplify it to help other people. And then as my career evolved doing the corporate ladder, I also always stayed involved with teaching or coaching or mentoring at some capacity. And then as I followed the societal norms, I realized that what really fills me up is that ability to pay it forward. And after looking more into what coaching is, what it takes, the fulfillment of helping individual designers get what they want next was far more satisfying than any of the awards or gratitude that comes with making rich people richer on the corporate side of things.
Right.
So that's a short story of it.
Love it. Yeah. We do not want to make rich people even richer. That's cool. Okay, so before we start, I also want to remind folks again, and because some of them are like commenting saying, where's the YouTube link? All right, so these conversations are always recorded, so you can head to YouTube to watch the full episode. Just search Chris from UX Playbook, or I'll leave a link in somewhere in the chat, the live chat, if you guys will give me a second. We don't want any dead hair here, but let's start introducing this topic, right? Designers try to sell themselves, but they focus on process over impact. They don't tailor their message to their audience. They miss out on the so what factor. They bury their sort of unique value when they're trying to sell themselves. And they end up being generic, ultimately forgettable. So that's why we're here to have this conversation today and to touch on, how can you lean into what fills you up, how to be clear on what you want to do next, and how to reframe your past experience to your advantage. And, Steven, you've helped, hundreds of designers nail their narrative. So you're literally the perfect person to speak about this too. So, if you struggle to sell yourself, guys and girls out there, listen, take notes, and go ahead and drop any questions. So let's just dive into the first thing that I mentioned, which is how can we, learn or lean into what fills us up, Steven?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that that's where you wanted to start also. So a lot of it, although similar to my path around how societal has those norms for us, what I really want and encourage designers to do is to pay attention to what they enjoy. So this feeling of like, oh, I have to be everything or I have to fit in is more of the result of what other people expect of you. Instead, what I encourage you to do is to listen to the tasks that you almost do naturally. Taking care of the things that you're like, oh, why doesn't everybody do that? Those are benefits for you that you don't realize other people can benefit from. So staying tuned to what do you enjoy, what do you do naturally, what could other people potentially come to you for in a way that you could help use that to tell your story if you enjoy doing it. There's a difference between do you like it and are you good at it? So paying attention to what you like versus what you're good at is a better way to go into living the life that you want and not necessarily what everybody expects from you.
Yeah. And I think lots of folks will have this question of how do I know what I'm good at? Is there a way you typically sort of advise folks?
Yes. So pay attention to what are things that you enjoy doing, things that people tend to come to you for, or things that you tend to get praised on. So by listening to that, there's going to be characteristics of things that you, again, probably likely take for granted. But if there's people that tend to come to you, like for example, for me, I noticed that as my career evolved, more designers, more people would come to me asking for help. And paying attention to those signs allowed me to be like, oh, there's something here that I wasn't aware of before.
Yeah. And like, I think for more, senior folks like ourselves, we've had decades of experience and we're kind of like fine-tuned what we do. But for some of the beginners, let's just say you're transitioning to UX and stuff like that, can they also do that? Can they also tune into like that side of things if it's not UX related?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the three different types of designers that I tend to help, you just talked about the advancement. There's also that introduction or transitioning space. So if you're new, it's like, what are the things that you are learning, whether if you're self-taught, taking a boot camp, doing more of a formal education, all of those are different ways for you to learn the UX foundation and pay attention to the stuff that maybe comes a little bit more naturally to you. So it might be like, do you consider yourself more of a researcher? Do you consider yourself an architect or an artist or an author? Like, what are those characteristics that maybe happen a little bit easier or something that you're like, yeah, I really like this. I might not be good at it yet. I really like it. If you're new, that's the way to look at it. And then if you're transitioning into the space, think about some of the past characteristics that maybe had a different synonym on how they talked about it. So how do you reframe those past experiences? You're not changing your skills. You're just calling it something different because your new audience has a different word for it. So being able to look at, like, for example, when I've helped teachers transition, it's like they're dealing with probably 30 crying kids, which might be easier than 5 pissed off adults. So like, how do you look at that and say like, oh, what characteristics allow me to run that room in order to tell that story?
Yeah, maybe this is a question that I should have asked to set up the context, but why do you think leaning into what fills you up is important?
Ooh, I love it. My instinct on that is because you have to live with yourself, and I want you to live a life that you enjoy living. So if you're constantly trying to chase what other people want of you, that element of satisfaction generally isn't as easy or fulfilling as it is by living what you want to do and helping other people just accommodate or support that part of you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it'll probably be like way more sustainable if you can find those signals in the things that you like to do and just do more of that stuff versus the stuff that you don't. That sucks the energy out of your day, right?
Yeah, yeah. Especially when people talk about burnout. Burnout tends to be because you're doing things that you don't want to do all the time. Like if you're doing something you love all the time, it's way harder to be burned out than feeling like you're just constantly chasing somebody else's expectations.
That's right. Is there a method or way that you like to track like what drains your energy versus what energizes you?
Yeah, yeah. So I actually, every Monday morning, I do a self reflection. I call it a note to self, and it has 3 parts. The first part is an open letter to myself, just kind of talking about train of thought, how have I been for the past week. The second part is actually where I do what I call a priorities check. So I've been able to identify what I consider internal priorities that I need to do to take care of myself. Examples of that being rest, relax, refuel, recharge. And then the external priorities being, how do I want to show up for others, friends, family, finances, future, career, those aspects of it. And then the last part, I write an intent for myself for that week.
Mm,
So by doing that, it allows me to check in with myself for an hour and just calm down and look at where I'm at and then gauge, like, how do I feel like I'm doing from the last time I've checked in? And that really helps me stay true to me and realize if I feel like I'm comfortable or doing something that I'm not okay with.
right. And have you ever like gone back in the archives and been like, oh my God, on this day is so different from where I am like today?
I try not to.
Mm,
They are all saved documents. I create a new one every week by saving out the previous week and then review it before I start. And because I track my priorities as numbers, the
mm,
nerd inside me wants to eventually plot those numbers and see if I can track trends. But there's a part of me that takes me out of the moment if I were to do that. So
mm.
I know what I wrote. I was there. I was present at the time. I know that there are periods of my life where things maybe have been harder or easier than others. I don't necessarily need to go back. Although there's also an element of like, we always talk about how we've read old people's writings, right? Like, oh, you stumble across letters of like what it was like to live 100 years ago. And because everything's digital, it might be harder. But there's a part of it that's like, maybe someday somebody will stumble across these letters. And it's almost like reading my own diary. And I am terrified for that to happen. And that's how I do it. I do it because it's what I need right now and how I take care of myself.
Yeah. I mean, great material for like an autobiography or now with AI, find themes throughout, you
Yeah.
could, there's multiple ways you could play with it, but okay. But the short answer is no, stay in the moment and look forward. I love this from one of our listeners or watchers. Yay, self-reflection. I do it on Fridays. Great. Monday,
Awesome.
Fridays, whatever works for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And Dane also says that yes, he has some time block, and I do something very similar. So okay, folks are out there
Great.
and figuring out their priorities. That's cool. Okay, the other thing I wanted to touch on around this topic of leaning in to what fills you up. Um, what do you do when what fills you up isn't valued by your company, or you don't necessarily have that infrastructure in place if you're a designer, for example?
Yeah. So where you get, there's a difference from my perspective. There's a difference between personal and professional satisfaction. And ideally, there's a little bit of overlap or a lot of overlap. If
Mm,
you are in a role that doesn't fill you up right now, being true to what you know can fill you up, asking for what you want helps a lot. Like I've helped plenty of designers who come to me thinking that their only out is to get a new job. And then as they got more comfortable finding out what they didn't know that they were missing, they're able to then go back to their leadership or go back to their peers. Either way, it's their current employer asking for what they want to do, and it works. Like if you're able to say, hey, I see there's an opportunity here, can I try it? Or I would like to do more of a certain task. Chances are they just didn't know, and they're not there to read your mind or try to predict, because everybody's a little bit selfish doing what they're told to do. So if you're able to go back to your current employer at any capacity, there's actually somebody, a designer that I'm working with right now, who's looking to transition from being like, she's currently like I believe it's like a front desk at a hospital, like it's in the medical space, not exactly UX from the way that we would learn it. But she thinks about like, okay, how do I make these client experiences better? How do I make the patient experience better? How do I make the onboarding experience better for my coworkers? So like there's UX opportunities if that's what fills you up, or there's ways to lean into design, even if that's not your title, if you know to ask for it. And the hardest thing is just not knowing what you don't know in order to advocate for yourself.
Right. The unknown unknowns. And this, this is a great segue to sort of the next topic, was like how to be clear on what you want to do next, right? You said first ask these questions and really reflect, and then how can you get to the clear?
Yeah, so what I tend to do with designers, that might be the way to talk about this, is looking at, if you see job descriptions as companies' requirements documents, how do you assess the job descriptions to try to understand things that you want to be doing, things that you don't know what they are, and things that you definitely don't want to be doing? So job descriptions generally have 3 parts: fluff about the company, responsibilities for the job, qualifications. If you dive into those, you can find 3 things, which is the tools, the outcomes, and the impact. So if you're able to look at like, okay, what are the tools that they're expecting you to do? What are the things that they expect you to be able to delivering against? And then how do they expect you to do that? And as you look through it, it's usually weaved or buried inside of a job description. But if you're able to look at those and say, pull out the things that you're like, this would be exciting. Throw out the things where you're like, that doesn't sound interesting to me. And then there's something in between, you're like, I'm not sure. And that's where you can do research on your own, ask for help, but really just dive into, or if you don't want to do it that way, you could also have coffee chats or conversations, less about give me portfolio feedback or review my resume or whatever kind of give mentality it might be, but go into this like, what do they do and how do they do it? And as you learn other people's stories, put it through the lens of, does that sound interesting for something you would want to do every day? And I've done that for my own self. Like even when I got into career coaching, before I made the leap to do that, I had conversations with people and I was like, is this something that I would actually want to do? And it was never about them giving me feedback. It was all about what do they do and why do they do it?
Right.
How does that, is that similar to the way that you talk about it too? Or how does that sit with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I get this question quite a lot, and I think my answer really depends on how I feel that day. But there's, I think, multiple paths on being clear. I think some like one path might work for someone, one path might work for others. And for me, I think I'm kind of tuned into the things that fill me up. Like I naturally do them, therefore I naturally spend more time on them, and then it's quite obvious for me. But for others, I always typically say like, well, if you don't know what you don't know, then obviously get in the know, but try a lot of stuff within that field that you think you want to get into. Speak to a lot of people within that field and figure out exactly what you said, which is like how they do something. Like, does that seem like the life I want to live? Like, do I want to be a software engineer, for example, right? See how they, live in the terminal and they're always on their laptops or they don't ever sleep. Like, is that the life you want to lead? And then also there's something else, which is you can reflect back and look at the wins, the highest points of your personal life or professional life. And you can say, well, what motivation and what values come from that, right? Values being things that you're like non-negotiable, motivations like why you did something. And then kind of like say, okay, well, if my value is to, be creative, and the motivation is that I want, freedom, then you can quite clearly outline the next step you want to take is something that's creative freedom, and that's a non-negotiable for you. And if this opportunity gives you that, then that's quite aligned. Not saying you will get it, but at least it's clearer. So like kind of reflecting back at your career and then connecting those dots.
Yeah. I like it.
How do you separate shoulds from actual wants, and how do you differentiate those if they come up in coaching?
Yeah, shoulds versus wants is a battle that I think we all come in contact with all the time. The way that I help designers try to differentiate them, it's never the same for everybody. A few techniques that tend to work is staying true to what are the definite no's. So if you're able, like shoulds versus wants get fuzzy. If you're able to go through and figure out what your definite no's are, then you can probably try to go into this, like, is it related to I should be doing that? Or is it like, yeah, I definitely want this? Even the breakdown that I look at is like need, want, and deserve. So that like needs and wants is different. And then the shoulds gets into like, is it this element of because you think you should or because you deserve it based off of whatever criteria you might be having against that?
Right.
That's a great question though. How do you help people differentiate between shoulds and wants?
I think it's like I like to go by gut. Maybe it's not the most accurate, but I think there's something very strong about your own intuition of should and wants. So of course, there's always a list of shoulds, right? Whether it's in the job descriptions, like I should do this, I should do that, right? I should learn to code, for example. That's what designers always ask. But if it doesn't excite you as a first, or we should approach it also with that sort of experimentation mentality. It's like, well, if you've never tried a code, then you think you should do it. Maybe you don't want to, but you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. So I think having a mindset of experimentation, even trial by fire, is always a good way. And also, like, sometimes it's about getting past the suck. I remember I used to hate public speaking, right? Until one of the companies I work for like forced us to present to clients like every single week without without failure. And it was just like, actually, I quite like this. But at the beginning, I was very hot, every day my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
Something about mom spaghetti. Sure.
Hopefully some folks got that. Just like good reference. So it is sometimes just kind of like figuring out along the way and not being so serious about like, oh, I should code this front end thing, where it's like, no, I can just tweak it. I could just play around. I could just set it up. Again, it's quite a fuzzy one. It's quite a difficult one for most folks. I also try to dig into the root problem of why do you think is a should, and are you sure that's what you want, or is that people telling you what you want? So that's it.
That actually comes up a lot. That reminds me of like, even as designers, when we're being given feedback, some feedback is very prescriptive and some feedback is very like general. So if you're getting prescriptive feedback of like, you should do this, you should do that, especially as designers who are looking for career advice, it's a sponge of chaos. Right. So you're going to get one person's opinion that's going to contradict somebody else's opinion and then somebody else's. So it's being able to like, okay, well, what do you want to do versus what everybody else thinks you should do? And paying attention to like, does it feel natural to you? Is it that gut instinct of like, yeah, this is comfortable, or like, I really hate that I should do it. It's like, then don't. Like, I hate it when people get feeling like they're just having to follow a list of do's, even if it doesn't feel good to them.
Yeah. And it comes up with designers trying to build their portfolios. That's like the perfect example.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many shoulds, and then people are like, what the hell? Like, this is going to take me like a year, and it's like, I need a job now. What the hell's going on? So that's exactly it.
I'm glad I see in the comments that some people get our Slim Shady reference. So I'm glad that landed well. That's a callback.
Yes, let me flash out on the screen just because, yes. 8 Mile. That's great. Okay, perfect. Slim Shady out the building. Okay, one of the other topics I want to touch on is how do you usually advise folks about reframing past experience to be attractive to like new audiences or new demographics you're trying to target, new companies, etc.?
Yeah. So this is the loaded question right there. We talk about telling your story. You, no matter where you are in your career, where you are in your journey, whether if you're new to design, transitioning in, not even wanting to be a designer and you're hanging out with us today, all of those are relevant topics. Staying true to who you are. We just talked about shoulds and wants. We've talked about responsibilities and priorities. Understanding that and then trying to figure out how do other people talk about the same thing. So if it's reading job descriptions, if it's watching YouTube videos, if it's reading books or materials, it's trying to figure out, just like an elementary school science project, how do you connect the dots so that light bulb turns on? And every conversation you have is a chance to test a new narrative for yourself. Everything that you learn is a chance to figure it out and sit into what feels comfortable for you, and how do you start absorbing the vocabulary that you're not used to using yet. So Chris, I think your example of public speaking is great. Like, you weren't there yet until you got used to it and it became more natural. Or if you're brand new and you just learned one way to do design because that's the way your boot camp taught it, or you're self-taught and you're trying to figure out how does everybody do things differently and nobody does it the right way or the same way, that is everybody figuring out their path. And it's up for you to own your story on how does it land with the people you're trying to attract. Similar to the other analogy is like dating or finding friends for the first time or trying to hang out in a new social group. Different people have different interests, and what lands with them is what matters if that's where you want to show up, if that's where you want to be, if that's what you want to be attracted to. So if you're starting or transitioning or even advancing in your career, what matters is, just like how we design experiences for customers, our customer in this situation is our target audience, which are maybe future employers, freelance clients, whatever that might be. Is like, what are they using if that's who you want to attract?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, when they think about telling their own story, just thinks about, well, I don't have this, long laundry list of accomplishments. How do I do that? But you're saying, no, that's not the most important thing. It's actually understanding who, the audience is, and then mapping back on your past experience. Can you connect those dots and try to align those two,
Yeah,
right?
like your level of accomplishments are more attractive than you believe them to be. Anybody, like everybody, like we
Mm.
take ourselves for granted. We don't know how we're at value. We don't know why we're interesting. That is the stuff that I help unpack with designers all the time. But once you figure out who you are and what you want, being able to tell that story, being able to make your optimize or tailor your resumes, optimize your LinkedIn profile, and own your portfolio becomes a lot easier when you know what you're going after. Just like when we're trying to design experiences, trying to come up with the outcome without knowing the purpose is really hard. So like starting in that low fidelity format, trying to figure out like, what are you trying to do and how does that show up for people who are interested in that? It helps craft your story a lot easier. It's just everybody
Mhm.
thinks, oh, I need a portfolio with case studies. And it's like, for what? What are you trying to attract? What are you trying to do? Like, I hate it when like people will come to me, I'll get a LinkedIn message. It's like, hey, can you give me resume feedback? That's all they say. And it's like, for what? And then they don't respond. It's like, well, your resume does a terrible job if you want to go work at a restaurant, right? Like, what are you trying to attract? If you don't have that context or that framing, how are you expecting to get feedback or advice or recommendations that are helpful?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, I don't know. I was just gonna go into a rant of like
Do
how
it.
the hiring process is really
Yeah.
broken.
Yeah.
It's like, over index it, or at least designers over index on like their resumes and then also their portfolios. And then, companies have like bad job descriptions. So it's just such a mess if you're a designer now trying to figure out how you get a new role, because things are changing so much. There's just no, like, I haven't seen any great companies, reinventing the whole, design hiring
Sure.
process. There's probably some out there if I dig, but on the top of the head, I can't think of that. And that kind of puts a lot of designers in a place where they're like, shit, maybe I should just be a product manager or something else.
Some of it too is, for me, networking is less about who you know and more about who knows you.
Mm.
Because we know a lot of famous people and that doesn't help us really at all. So
Hmm.
the more people who get to know you, the more that you are able to show up, the more that you're able to be relevant, the more that you're able to appear attractive to them, the easier it is to navigate that. So whether if it is trying to play the applicant tracking system game, as you were talking about, like it's terrible, and like how do you potentially do that? or being able to just engage in a community of people where you want to show up. And that tends to help also. It's like, okay, well, where do your target audience show up and how do you get them to know that you exist?
Yeah. How much stock do you put into like designers sort of sharing their story online and creating content or doing something to just show their work and show part of their story? How important is that in sort of the way you think about a designer's career?
I wouldn't put a lot of weight into it if it's not attractive for that designer to do.
Right.
So in the aspect of meeting where you're at and trying to do what you want to do, this element of like feeling pushed to show up on LinkedIn because everybody else is doing it, there's other ways to potentially get recognition. If you enjoy doing that, if you're like, yeah, I want to share and get feedback publicly and like post all the time, go for it. If you're like, that sounds tedious, I don't know how to do it, I'm worried about it and I'm curious, then to your earlier point, like, how do you just experiment with it? How do you maybe try once a month or so and just kind of say, this is what I'm working on? And a lot of people have been doing better about just building in public.
Yeah.
And that concept of being like, this is what I got, these are my thoughts right now, and you're just stating facts without trying to prove yourself or without trying to be something that you maybe don't know how or want to do yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the strategy from your experience about how do you share your story internally if you're working at a company? What things have you seen work, what doesn't, or how would you advise someone if they're like, okay, I want to grow in this company, but kind of getting overlooked or I'm a bit unheard. What do I do as a designer?
That's actually a good connection, I think, to Dane's question in the chat. Also, there's a few questions in that comment, but that might be something that we can probably hit both of these at the same time. Is just being able to be like, should your employers be a part of your story? They can be if it's relevant. So like if your point, I'm gonna try to put these two together, and if you want to help me out, we might need this. But there's an element of like, in your current company, if you just feel like you're just cashing in a paycheck and you're not satisfied and you want out, that's different than feeling like there's opportunity here. I like what I do. I like where I'm at. That can absolutely work into your story by trying to identify where are those opportunities. So how do you maybe go outside of your current team? How do you maybe build relationships with other designers or other people in your company who do what you want to be doing? So you can start just shadowing them, talking to them, lining up when your lunches are, just like, hey, you want to go like get lunch together, just to build a rapport. Like that was extremely helpful for me multiple times in my career, just to figure out like, who are they, meet them as people first, build that story, because you never know how that advocacy will help you eventually. So always build advocates is something that one of the most influential people I've ever worked for taught me, and I use it to this day. So when you're looking about that follow-up and that consistency, being able just to them like, hey, Chris is a good person. Dane is a good person. He has a good heart. He's reliable. He's authentic. He does good work. That stuff goes way farther than like, yeah, he's kind of a jerk, but his designs are pretty, right? So like, how do you look at that aspect of what is your story? What is that brand that you are building with everybody you interact with in your organization, to where people want to support you and people want to encourage you to do what you want to do? And sometimes that might be changing job titles completely. There was actually a designer, she was a business analyst and was like, yeah, this is fine in the analytics side, and then really liked the design, shadowed the designers, a full-time position opened up, and she was able to transition. So it's like in her current employer, just waiting for that shot of just like, yeah, they saw what I wanted and I was able to show up to do that. Is that answering all of it? I think so. There's a lot here, but I might be missing something.
I have an example here, which is related to Dane's question about what about negative experiences. I think negative experiences, teach us a lot about ourselves and where we fit in the world, and could be such an integral part of our story. So the example that I like to give, which is like in 2020, before the pandemic was at its height, where everything was like kind of locked down, I quit my job, and it was like the job that I've always wanted, and I got it, and it wasn't right for me, right? So that was a negative experience but however, I framed it into the things like, well, now I know what kind of impact I want, therefore that wasn't right for me, but I had to do it first, and the failure, whatever that failure was in that role that caused me to quit or caused me to do something else, that was, additional clarity that I wouldn't have had. And you could do this with any negative experience, right? You're like, okay, I screwed up here, but these are the things that matter. These are things I learned that now I will take to another client. You could anonymize it, of course. You don't want to call anybody out. If they're digging, I don't know if there's an NDA or whatever it is, but you could also, be honest with yourself of how you felt by framing it in a way that isn't, just talking shit, frankly, right? You're actually saying how you feel. Yeah.
I had a similar experience, as I talked about in my intro. Like, I climbed the corporate ladder of being a director, and then I was like, oh, this isn't healthy for me. The way that I frame it, it's not a negative experience. I did exactly what I wanted to do at the time. It's a learning experience of what I don't want. So the way that I frame it is, it's just not a place that I could be successful anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Dane, looking at it as like, oh, why did that project fail? It's like, it just wasn't a place where I could be successful anymore. It wasn't the right fit for you. It wasn't the right style, whatever you want to classify it as. Even with designers that I work with now, if they're unhappy, it's like, cool, it's not a place where you can be successful. And whatever success means to you is up to you. Yeah, versus having to like bash it. And you could anonymize it if you feel comfortable with that. That's completely up to you. It doesn't matter where it was or what it was. Like, Chris and I both aren't revealing where we had that negative experience, if that's how you want to classify it. It's just, we did what we thought we were supposed to do, going back to shoulds, and it realized that it's not what we wanted to do. So we listened to what filled us up and took a path that is far more fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. And you also want to be careful here, because I think it can be quite a bit of a like a tightrope where you kind of go in the other direction of like blaming the old circumstances. What you really want to do is, take full ownership of, what happened, right? And frame it in a way where it's like, no, here's, again, should versus want. So really like that kind of thinking you mentioned. Keep firing those questions at us. And Dane just responded, from negative experience in the lesson it taught you. I like it. Brilliant. Okay. Folks, if you have any questions, please fire away at us, because obviously, like always, I have many questions. So drop them in. And if you could be specific around how you want us to help in terms of how you're getting blocked by telling your story, or what is confusing about this topic, that would really help. So drop them in. So let me follow up with a... Okay, I think I just said this one, which was, how do you turn your project failures into compelling stories? Have you got any other examples for us that you've sort of helped folks be like, oh, this was not that great, but how do I frame it into something different?
It's always, yes, it's always to me, what is the takeaway? So as designers, we constantly get put on projects that either never ship, get defunded, ship and don't do well, right? So we've all heard about the first round of Google Glasses that didn't go well, the Facebook phone that didn't go well. Like, there are examples of stuff in the industry that maybe wasn't as successful as some of their competitors. That aspect of negativity is literally how you frame it. Like, oh, that didn't work. Everything that we do is an experiment. Everything that we do is trial and error. Chances are what we do is likely not going to be fatal. And if there's a chance that what you might do is going to be fatal to hurt yourself or others, maybe have a little more calculated of a decision before you do it. Other than that, like, try things out. You don't know it until you try it. And then that aspect of like, do you want more of that, or should you do more of that, is debatable. So in this element of how do you take a project, for example, that you might have done. And actually, there's a designer that I'm working with right now. We're going to talk about it later this afternoon, where she sent me a message. Was like, hey, how do I help decide a cost benefit exchange if I should walk away from this project or not? Right. So like, especially as you're a newer designer and you're trying to kind of earn your stripes a little bit, and you're told to get real world projects, a lot of that's going to come through volunteer work. And some of that volunteer work is maybe people who are in it for reasons that you're not aligned with. And then what that pulls from you is potentially a place where you're not going to be successful anymore, or it takes too much from you. That negativity is the learning experience for you to frame. You still added value throughout that project. You still did a lot of things throughout that project. You were there for a reason. It was funded for a reason. If you're with a current employer, all that stuff works. What is your lessons learned? Never end your case study with this like, all right, peace. right? Like wrap it up with this is lessons learned. These are the takeaways. Yeah, mic drop. Yeah, right. Like just end it with like, oh, mic drop. No, like what is that lessons learned? It could have been a brilliant project, right? Like it could have been a positive experience. Everything could have been rainbows and magic. What did you learn from that experience as well matters.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Not sure if you agree with this, but I'll just read it out. LinkedIn user, anonymous user, telling a story isn't enough at times. Okay, so that's the first thing. Do you agree with that statement? And then the second thing is, how do you make sure it's driven across?
I would love to know an example of when a story isn't enough, because I can agree and disagree with that statement. Like without context, it's really hard to know what that is, because everything we do tends to come through a story. And even data-informed decisions, data is something that could be debatably a story, a positive or a negative, depending on how you want to view it. So is telling a story always enough? Apparently not. Like, I'm not going to disagree with that statement because I don't have the context to disagree with it. How do you make sure it's driven across? It comes out how you frame the story. I don't know how to answer that question. That's probably not the expected answer. Like, your story might not be compelling enough, or your story might not be attractive to the people you're trying to tell a story against. Even when we talk about movies, some people love movies that other people hate. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie necessarily. It's just it wasn't for that audience.
Mm. Yeah.
What is your thought on this one, Chris? Like, this is interesting to take on.
Yeah, I think everything is some form of story. So I think it is enough. Like if I was just to put my stake in the ground, in general, it is enough. But obviously, stories could have different sort of output. Be a video, it could be a letter, it could be a handwritten note, it could be how you present yourself. It could be so many things. So I think, and fundamentally, I think, humans are all emotional, and stories is what really captures the imagination and has a pull. Like just usually don't work. So I think story is enough if I was to pick a camp. And then how do you make sure you drive it across? I think in facilitation, like if you've ever facilitated workshops or any sort of meetings, I think repetition is one of the rules that we tend to forget. We think that if we say something, people will remember it. No, they won't, right? Even in facilitation, you say it 3 times and then 90% of the room gets it, right? But the second time you say it, only 40% of the room gets it. So it's kind of like repeating yourself. Yeah. And also, again, going back to my previous point, different formats for different people. Depends what that story is. So let's just have an example of, like, let's just say, hey, design is important in this organization. That's the story you want to tell, right? And these are the reasons why. Well, not everybody in your organization will care about, the presentation you present on TGIF. Maybe they prefer an email. Maybe executives prefer for a short Slack message or whatever it is. Again, to your point, Steven, it's like you have to resonate with your audience and what they care about, right? So it's also what you include in the story is also really critical. So maybe when you say, is just the story enough? Well, then we say, what's the definition of that story? Like, what does it include? It's not just, the written word on a piece of paper, right? It's more than that. It's more emotional than that. So that would be my very fluffy, dancey answer around this. But yeah.
I want to build off of that as a plug here. Tom Griever's book, Articulating Design Decisions, does a really good job of helping you classify how do you potentially see the people you're telling stories to as personas that have different needs. So to your point, Chris, is like, well, what do they need? What do they want? Like that story might land, and trying to figure out what they need might require a conversation with them before you get into what the story actually is. So trying to understand who that person is. So I see the follow-up on this in the chat around, I think this came from the same anonymous person about a design researcher. Sometimes it's difficult to convince the scale and intensity. Sometimes that plays into how well do you know your audience and how well are they open to listening to your story. I have, in one of the past jobs that I had, which is why I left, I worked with a senior leader who just didn't want to listen. Like they didn't care about data. They wanted to do what they wanted to do the entire time. And you're like, cool, this isn't a place where I can be successful anymore. It didn't matter how well I told the story to them. It wasn't effective because they didn't care. So like that aspect of like, yeah, it might be difficult to convince scale and intensity. How does that person learn, and are they willing to learn? To your point, Chris, like not everybody listens. That was just an element of just like, when do you cut your losses? And it's not that the story isn't enough, it's that they're not willing to want to care.
Yeah, exactly. That's the reality we live in, right? Like if your story is a banger, but like let's say you released a movie and it's a banger, but nobody wants to see it because it's really dark and kind of horrible, then it is what it is. If people aren't just willing to open up, then yeah, exactly. There's nothing much you can do.
There's another question in the chat
okay.
that I want to get to that I think will be helpful. Christian, how do you balance telling an interesting story with being concise? So I think we both should take this one on, if you don't mind. I'm kind of emceeing for you now at this point. I'll go on this because I saw it and was marinating on it for a bit. My short answer to this, to go to the short question, stick to the facts. I help people do this all the time, whether if it's for their own design career and trying to tell a short case study, or if it's trying to present to senior leadership. Telling an interesting story that's concise is like, what do they care about? How do they care? And what's the purpose? So if you just stick to the facts, like this is the problem, this is what we explored, this is our recommendation. Or this is what I did, this is why I did it, and this is how it helped. So like that element of telling an interesting story that's like, oh, this is like, if you set up the problem, that's what makes the story interesting, right? So if you're just like, oh, let me tell you the time I went walking through a park. Why is that interesting? Let me tell you when I saw a bear in a park. Ooh, right? Like, what is that setup so it engages their interest? And then how do you get to the facts in a way that people are like, all right, cool, I got what I need, and I'm
out. I have a couple of thoughts about this, but I think what I like in terms of like my communication style, I like stories or conversations when there has that like one line hook, or the first kind of introduction of the story, which basically tells me it in a way that I can understand what it's about, right? So for example, it's like a email subject line, right? Like a good email subject line is 1, interesting, 2, really concise, and 3, sets up the context as well, right? I don't want to like guess what the context is. And this is just my way of communicating. I don't want to guess what the context is. I want to know what I'm in for and how long this story, discussion, presentation is, right? So I think a lot of also, I believe executives like communication that way. Like, give me the hard things straight away and then go into like the details behind it, because what you don't want is people kind of like get lost right at the beginning. So this is a communication style that I encourage people on my team to do as well. So like, okay, first give me the one-liner and then we can dive into the details. Should I need more details? Because yeah, like interesting is also, a definition that we define ourselves. We define if it's so like if I say, hey Steven, let me tell you a story, he will tell me if it's interesting or not. But so we have to try to keep it to one line. If he's not interested, not much I can do. So that's it. And yeah, I think I really like your framework. I think that's a good one to kind of especially if you're thinking about like how do you hook them as well. Yeah. So here I'm just trying to see if there's any more questions.
There's one that just came around at the end, like it might have been, well, not sure if it was covered. Yeah, here we go. What is the hardest career move you've ever done? Ooh.
Okay.
Do you want to take this first?
You want me to take this?
Who wants to go first?
I take this.
Go for it.
I think the hardest career move was the most kind of recent one, just because it was like obviously recency bias. And, when you're a lot older, change is a lot more difficult. So, when I was getting into design, I come from like a marketing background or a business background. It was very like, I don't know what I don't know. This is fun, infinite energy. But, 2020, quit my job and didn't really know what to do. I put a lot of pressure on myself because I had sort of like, climbed that career ladder quite fast and, was doing well, and then not knowing where, how I'm going to pay my bills, what I'm going to do next. And, I spent a good few years kind of just, being a bum, like just working on things and not really doing much. Right. So that was definitely the hardest career move, which is, coming from design and, leading design teams to kind of talking about design and, educating other folks about design and telling you what worked for me that potentially could work for you. That was the hardest thing because, like the internet, people can just be harsh and, can be keyboard warriors. So that was also, hard to adapt to like a new form, right? Where when I was leading design teams, it was a lot more about working with people individually, one-on-one, working with different sort of teams cross-functionally. But when you're working and you're sort of working online, it's you yourself, and that's it. It's you on a laptop writing down your thoughts. So it was definitely the hardest career move for me.
I'm going to take this question in hard versus like difficult, in the sense of like, it wasn't hard for me to want to go into coaching. It was mentally scary to do it, right? Like that idea of I just did what society told me to do. I got to a level that most people would dream to get to. And then it was just like, oh, I don't like this. So it wasn't hard to actually make the switch. It was mentally intimidating. It was scary. It was like, I'm going against the norm. I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing, like that whole thing. But is it what I want to do? Absolutely. So that aspect of like, what's the hardest career move I've ever done? I think the hardest thing I've ever done was when I've had to move across the country, or not, I chose to move across the country. So living in the States, I've lived in 4 different states over the period of 10 years. Every time I moved to those states, I had to reestablish myself to get relevancy, to get a job. That is hard. Was it scary? Not really, because once I did it the first time, I kind of knew what to do. It isn't easy to do though, where what your story is like my similar path, like that was scary for me, right? Like be like, I want to do this. It's what I want to do. It wasn't hard to put in the notice and actually do it. It was just scary because you're like, uh-oh, I'm going against the grain to do what I want, not what I should. Where that element of moving and going into a whole new market that I've never lived in before, I didn't know anybody there, and I needed to figure out how do I get hired for what I'm already knowing that I'm good at. That is hard.
Yeah. One of just go back to the stories, one of the hardest things I think is being patient, and having, and letting compounding do its magic. Because like, obviously when you do anything, you have to wait for the results. Like it's very, years. So that was just like, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm tired of this. Can I endure, right? Because you're doing good things, or you're trying your best at least, but it's like not working. So that's like the patience of that is, if you don't quit, you basically win. So it's just about not quitting.
Trying to do it in a way that's like, these get rich quick schemes are usually ethically dangerous and not necessarily easy, where this like playing the long game is hard. It's investing in like the stock market is like, okay, I can live my life while that hopefully compounding interest pays off over time. Thinking about that as like personal clout, personal growth, personal development, anything that you're trying to do is something where as long as you do it ethically and good, it should pay off for you. It's just, it sucks to wait. Like sitting in the suck is hard. Absolutely. Like trusting yourself.
Yeah, Scott Galloway has, exactly. Scott Galloway has a great quote. I could get you rich. It'll just take time. Right? I can get everybody rich. It'll just take time. So it's like, you could do what you want to do and reach whatever success level you want to. It'll just take a while, right? It just,
And that's where like investing in
your thumbs.
Services or tools or coaching hopefully speeds that process up a little bit, but it doesn't mean that it's not easier, or it doesn't mean that it's not easy. It's just you're potentially getting help to speed that time up.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a great segue. Steven, tell us about your program and I'll let you, take a couple of minutes or take as much time as you want. Tell us about the program where you help designers with their careers. Let me just flash that on the screen so folks can see this. Has it come up? Yeah, I'll let you take some time.
So absolutely. So thank you, Chris. So I am a career coach for designers in the sense that I have built my career as a designer, and now I help other designers get what they want next. And I specifically talk about it as what you want next, because to me, it's not about the aspects of a dream job. It's not about what society tells you to do. It's really about figuring out what do you want to do and how do you get to where you want to go. Because of that, I offer all my coaching on the basis of a SaaS model. It's that monthly membership subscription concept, or it's getting access to materials on demand in a way that you're not signing yourself up for something that puts you in an uncomfortable situation. It's really about trying to meet you where you're at and help you get to where you want to go in a place that you feel supported and comfortable doing exactly what you want to do. And some of that, a lot of the designers that I help, is about really figuring out what it is you want to do first. Just like what we've talked about before, the hardest part is figuring out what you want to do. And then it's figuring out, how do you tell that story? How do you tell your story so you become attractive to the people that you want to attract, to be able to get paid to do what you want to do? And throughout this entire session, by hearing Chris talk about his journey, hearing me talk about mine, we are examples of exactly that in the designers that we have helped in our career to get them to do what they want to do. And I want to do that with you as well. So it's Steven Steiner, career coach for designers, and I'm here to help you get what you want next. And I appreciate Chris for having me be a part of this story. And I hope you got a lot of takeaway from this. And if you want to chat more, happy to do that and figure out how we can help you get what you want next.
Amazing, man. Yeah. So guys, scan that QR code if I'm pointing in the right direction. I don't know, sometimes it's weird. Okay, cool. So yeah, scan that QR code if you're interested to work with Steven, or at least have a chat with Steven to see if it's a right fit for you, right? Okay, perfect. I just want to say thank you so much, Steven. I know we're running out of time, but anything else you're working on that you're excited about, or a thought you want to leave the audience with before we go?
Yeah, so not in terms of what I'm working on. If you want aspect of coaching, if you want to chat more about how I can help you, absolutely scan that QR code. Happy to have that conversation. If there's one thing that you walk away from this with, is stay true to who you are. You are attractive, you are interesting, you are desirable for exactly who you are. Figure out where your audience is, figure out where you want to show up, figure out how you become attractive to that audience, and don't change anything about you. Just make sure that you find the people that want to hang out with you also.
Awesome. And this will be reposted for the folks who just asked if it's going to be reposted. I keep on repeating myself. Yes, this is recorded, guys. So replay it, and rewatch it. Thank you again, Steven. I'm going to take you off stage while I do the final wrap up. I know you need to go, so feel free to drop and we can have a chat another time.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. Thanks for all the great questions. I look forward to a future opportunity to help more designers get what they want next.
All right, man. Peace. Bye. All right, guys. So again, if you're interested to work with Steven and you kind of need to unblock yourself or figure out how to tell your story better, please scan that QR code. I'll leave it on screen for a minute while I find what I'm supposed to do next. Okay, so before we go, I want to, and I also, before I go, Daniel, thanks, Steven. I can vouch for him. You're the best. Okay, so that's like the best testimony that just came in at the right time. So again, if you want that sort of experience, you should scan this QR code. I'll leave it up again just for a quick second while you do that. Again, there's the replay, so the QR code will also be scannable. All right, moving on. I also want to thank Usercentrics for sponsoring today. If you're worried that your website or app is not complying with global privacy laws, US state regulations, and ad tech requirements from the likes of Google or Microsoft, don't worry, because Cookiebot is here to save you, to help you collect and manage consent with their plug and play solution. Flexible, easy to integrate, and plays nice with things you're using already, like WordPress or even Wix. Privacy-led marketing is if you're interested to get a free cookie banner or just learning how to be better at your consent management, you could scan that QR code. Again, you can get a free cookie banner for your website, cookiebot.com. And thank you again for sponsoring this live stream. The next event we have is not June the 18th. So let me just take that off in case it confuses anybody. The next live stream we have is July the 9th, how to be a design manager. So if you're looking for, if you're sort of thinking about the first step into management, how your skills shift as you manage versus do, and how to speak the language of leadership, that's our next live stream, how to be a design manager, from former VP of UX turned leadership coach, Alison Gretz. So you can tune in by, again, scanning that QR code. You know what to do. And we'll be talking about all the things I just mentioned. So to listen to that and more conversations like this, you can also head to live.uxplaybook.org and you'll get notified for future events and events only. Again, these conversations are recorded. Head to YouTube to watch the full episode. Chris from UX Playbook, just search that in the search box somewhere. And until next time, bye. Oh, by the way, I'm streaming from a cave in Turkey, if you didn't know. But bye.
This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
This is the design of everyday people.